So in this video I'm going to share with you some upgrades and techniques that I've learned along the way to increase the accuracy of my CZ-75 shadow. You can upgrade a bunch of parts from the manufacturer, which I've been told are acceptable to IPSC, but you'll want to check the rules just to make sure. And there's a bunch of techniques that I've learned along the way that will increase accuracy as well. And always, before you begin, make sure you remove the magazine, check to see your chamber is clear, and make sure everything else is clear. Never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot, especially during dry fire, even if you have a dummy cap in there. The stock recoil spring 16 pounds, you can replace that with a lighter spring, 11 pounds, and that'll reduce the amount of force being pushed back into the frame through that spring. The only problem is that the slide will slam back harder into the frame. You can solve that by adding the rubber buffer, which will allow the slide to bounce off the frame and go back into the locked position. So both of those upgrades will combine together to create a much lighter and smoother cycle. Another way to make your gun more accurate is to reduce the double action pull. So replace your main spring, which is 15 pounds, with a 13 pound mainspring. That'll just make it so the hammer takes less force to push back. It'll reduce your double action pull, and it'll reduce the amount of force that the slide needs to push back on as well. So it reduces your recoil once again and increases your follow-up shots. Since your hammer is going to be hitting with less force, you want to replace your firing pin spring with a lighter one, just to reduce the chances of a misfire. Usually that comes in a combo pack, if not, order them separately. Right now the steel slide is hitting the steel of your frame, and every time that hits, it hammers forces back into your hand, as if a metal hammer was hitting a metal nail. Now if you put rubber between that, it's going to make the impact a lot less. You're going to transfer less forces into your hand and therefore have less recoil. It's kind of like wearing rubber shoes while running on pavement. All the forces are returned to your leg, and so you're not hammering into the pavement with your foot. It just reduces the amount of forces transferred to your frame. And by reducing the amount of forces hammered into your frame, you're going to get less recoil, and those forces will bounce back into the slide, push it forward, and lock it in place. By replacing the plastic guide rod with a stainless steel guide rod, you're going to increase the weight and therefore reduce your muzzle flip and just increase the mass of the gun so that you have a more stable gun. The Shadow is already a heavy gun because of its full metal frame, and by adding more weight to it, you're just reducing the recoil even more. Another way to make your slide cycle much quicker is to use Drilube. There won't be any dependence on the viscosity of the oil, and that just removes one factor that will slow down the cycling of your slide and therefore reduce the amount of recoil felt, the amount of muzzle flip, and it'll speed up your follow-up shots. And there's a bunch of techniques that I've learned along the way that will increase accuracy as well. The first and the most important thing is grip. You've got to get the webbing of your shooting hand up as high as possible on the gun. This has a nice extended beaver tail, so it keeps your hand nice up and high and lets the gun push back on it. On Glocks you can get even higher, but you got to watch that slide bite, otherwise it'll hit you in the hand. Some people have it so high that it slides a little bit and touches a little bit on it, but it's not a big deal. Your left hand is supposed to be locked in the forward position, so if it's in the middle, what's going to happen is your gun's going to go up and down. If you lock it in the forward position, your gun's going to be locked as far forward as it can go, so it can't go any further forward. If you lock it in the forward position, your grip will be nice and tight and recoil will be managed a lot easier. Your left hand's supposed to squeeze very tight, so it's almost shaking but not quite there. And your right hand should be squeezing gently, tight but not super tight, just comfortable. If you're squeezing so tight that your gun's shaking, then that's too tight because that's going to increase your inaccuracies. Your right hand shouldn't be completely loose because when you go to pull the trigger, your three other fingers, as you can see here, are kind of moving, right? These three fingers should be tight like this. And then when you pull your trigger finger, notice that your three fingers can't move at all. That's what you want on your gun. So if you're holding it loose like this, when you pull the trigger finger, you can see that the gun will move quite a bit. But if these three fingers are nice and tight, then the gun shouldn't pull to the left when you pull the trigger. The left hand squeezing down on your right hand just reinforces that stability. Also, if you want to see if you're milking the grip by letting go of these three fingers and loosening up your right hand's grip when you're taking your finger off the trigger, You can go ahead and tie a string to a water bottle and put about 500 to 700 milliliters of water in there. And if you're going to be milking your grip, the bottle will slowly slide when you lift your finger up. So if you're not milking your grip, then you're going to keep the water bottle in the same spot. So you want to develop muscle memory so that your fingers stay nice and tight. And then when you've got both hands on there, you probably won't be milking the grip and moving your hand back and forth. And it's really important to increase your grip strength because that's basically what your grip is made out of. To increase your grip strength, you can use a grip strength exercise tool, or you can use a power ball. The power ball is actually one of the best ways to increase your grip strength for both your left and right arms. So if you have a strong grip, it'll definitely hold the gun more steady, handle all that recoil, and you'll get back on target quicker, fire follow-up shots quicker, and just be that much more accurate. So definitely do some strength training, and that'll help you as well. The power ball is actually the #1 way to increase your grip strength. I don't think there's anything stronger than this. It only takes a couple minutes a day, so if you can't get to the gym, this is definitely the way to increase your grip strength. The operation of the power ball is pretty simple. It's just a gyroscope that pushes back on your hand, and as you speed it up, RPM increases, force goes back into your hand, and it pumps up your forearm and arm pretty good. This one has LEDs, so it slows down the RPM a bit, but if you get the one without LEDs, you'll get the RPM even higher. It can reach up to 15,000 RPM. So within 40 seconds, your forearm gets pretty tired already, and that's a great exercise for your arms. If you get the one with a meter, as you get stronger, you can tell that your RPM's going up higher and higher. So that's a good way to verify that your strength is increasing as you exercise. Your thumbs should also be resting on your frame, not the slide. They should just be resting on the frame, just barely touching it. If you push on it, then your gun will go like this. And if you have them open like this, it's just not very comfortable. So have them just rested on the frame, just like that, and they should be pointing towards the target. Some people curl their thumbs in, but it doesn't really work for the CZ-75. On the newer versions, they've reduced the size of that safety so people can curl their thumbs in if they like, but I prefer to have them aim towards the target. So what we're talking about with this anti-rotation is that the right hand pushes forward on the gun and rotates it downwards. Your left wrist is already locked in this position, so your index finger is going to push on the bottom of the trigger guard here. And it's going to push against this downward force, so it's going to push up on it while you're pushing down. Since you're already pushing against the recoil, it's going to just kick quickly and then come straight back to your target. If you don't push down on this, what's going to happen is it's going to go up. Since you have no downward pressure, it's going to come back slowly. So you'll see that in the next video. Pushing down on it, right after he shoots, it comes straight back down on target like this. And then when he shoots normally without the anti-rotation, he shoots and then it comes back and drifts back. You'll see a lot of the top shooters keep their hand really far forward. It's because they're pushing down on it while pushing up. Some of them will have it on the serrations, some of them will have it right underneath. Depends on how big their hands are. So try that out and see how it works for you. So this is with the rotation and the shock absorber pressure. The anti-rotation, I call it. If you watch carefully, the muzzle flip will be reduced and follow-up shots will be much quicker. This is with the free floating method, where you're just holding the gun. Now as you can see, muzzle flip is much greater, and your reactivation of the target is much slower. As you can see on the left side, the finger's on the trigger guard, and we're applying anti-rotation, and on the right hand it's free floating, and there's a huge difference. Some of the world's best have won competitions with it, so definitely give it a try and see how you like it. Another thing is trigger pull. If you have snap caps, you can do dry fire. When you take a shot, follow through the recoil, so keep the finger down, and then once you're on target, pull off. A lot of people will just flick it and then let go right away. That creates a lot of movement, so don't do that. So you can practice pulling on the trigger hundreds and thousands of times. Put a penny on the front sight, balance it there, and if you can pull 100 times without that falling off, you're doing pretty good. So if you can pull that trigger hundreds of thousands of times without dropping the penny, you'll have a very good trigger pull. While you're practicing dry fire practice, you can download the IPSC targets, print them off, tape them on the wall, and shoot them with a laser. If you videotape it and watch your trigger pull, you can see how much you move the laser around. So if you click the description of this video, you'll see a link to the IPSC targets. Click on that, and you'll load up a bunch of IPSC targets. If you place it at 7 yards, it'll look like an IPSC target that's 15 meters away. It'll be sized for that. The good thing about this is that you can place this target at 7 yards and it'll look like a 50-meter target. And then at 7 yards you'll have 4 50-meter IPSC targets to shoot at. So that's a great way to practice shooting IPSC targets without actually having to place 4 of them at 50 meters away. So you can place about 16 of these at 7 yards and easily shoot up 16 IPSC targets, practice that without actually having to put up 16 IPSC targets. So I printed off a whole bunch that are for 7 yards. So I'm going to place them at 7 yards and do some dry fire practice using a laser. So that's another great way to practice dry fire shooting. So once you put them 7 yards away, you can go and practice shooting the alphas. Since this is double action, you'll notice that it moves quite a bit. So you can go ahead and practice your grip, how hard you hold it, and how you pull your trigger finger so that it doesn't move too much before it clicks. You can practice low and ready and see if you can hit the alpha on the first shot. The first shot will be double action anyways. If you can practice and keep it still in double action, you'll have no problem with single action, so it's a good way to practice. As you can see, you can hit the IPSC target at 15 meters away easily. The target at 50 meters away takes much longer to steady your hand on the alpha and pull the trigger in double action. So this is a good way to practice hitting your alphas at various distances on IPSC targets. You can print these off and bring them to the range and shoot them at 7 yards away as well. And I find this is pretty similar to hitting IPSC targets 50 meters away. As for stance, isosceles works the best for me. I just stand naturally, push the gun up to my sight. I don't drop my head down or turn my head any. I just stand perfectly straight, pull the gun up to my dominant eye, and then pull the trigger. And when you bring the gun up, you lead with the front sight like this, and then bring the back sight up to the front sight. And that leads us to our next point, sight picture. One thing that'll help your accuracy really quickly is focusing on this front sight. That allows you to get the back sight in the right position and then take the shot. Once you focus on the front sight, you'll notice your accuracy increases by quite a bit. So go target practice and make sure you're shooting well with no time restrictions. Just take your time and start aiming. Once you got your groups down to something very reasonable, then you can start practicing to shoot quickly. While you're target practicing, Google handgun diagnostic target and you'll come up with a bunch of targets. Here's one I got from PhotoBucket. It tells you if you're using too much trigger finger, too little, jerking or slapping, breaking your wrist, anticipating dropping your muzzle, stuff like that. So you can use this target to see what you're doing and then you can try to counteract it. One of the best drills to get you shooting accurately is the cap and ball drill. Watch the front end of your muzzle and see what you do when you hit a dummy round. So get your friend to load up 5 live rounds or a random number and then a dummy round. When you pull that trigger on that dummy round, you're going to notice that you slide forward or you drop the muzzle or you do something weird. So you can remove that habit from your shooting quite quickly if you use the cap and ball drill. In this video, you see that the gun is being pushed forward to anticipate the recoil. The muzzle is not being dropped, but by pushing forward on the gun, you also drop the muzzle a bit or increase the inaccuracies. So you can use this technique to remove any habits that you may have gained, and you can easily see and diagnose what you're doing wrong. You can get a friend to load up random rounds and then the dummy round in a magazine, or you can use 3 magazines, put in your dummy round, load up a number of random live rounds, then you can mix up those 3 magazines and then use one of them, and you'll catch yourself anticipating recoil when you actually hit the dummy round. There's a bunch of different drills you can come up with. Place 2 shots on one target, 2 shots on another, reload, 2 more shots on one target, 2 more shots on another, reload, stuff like that. One trick I use to speed myself up is to count my rounds, and on my last round I won't fire it and lock my slide open. I'll drop my mag and put a new one in, and then I can keep on shooting. So practice planning every one of your shots, counting your rounds, not locking your slide open, catching yourself with your pants down. So in the last round, you can quickly flip your magazine out, put in a new one, and keep on shooting. It won't speed you up that much, but by removing that one extra step, you definitely cut some time off your round. It's also good to never be empty anyways, so you should always count all your shots and plan all your shots. So definitely practice that, and it'll speed you up. When you are trying to speed up your shooting, make sure you reacquire your target before pulling that follow-up shot. That's why it's so important to reduce recoil through grip, through the weight of the gun, through the weight of the springs, adding that buffer, all that stuff. And of course, if you can join as many competitions as you can, practice as much as you want, and you'll get a lot better. You can find most of these parts online. I've put links in the description, or you can buy them from your local gun shop. I hope that video gives you some ideas of how to increase the accuracy of your CZ-75 Shadow and pistol shooting in general. Thanks for watching, and I hope that helps.